Hello, my name is Marshall, and you're listening to the Dungeon Speak podcast.
Once upon a time, on a balmy night, a stocky, muscular figure moves through a dark underbrush. As he makes his descent down an 80-foot tall hill, moonlight shines down on the treetops and tall grass. This figure creeps along in the darkness towards ignorant yaks. Tall, stocky, and bulky animals with long hair hanging heavily on their sides and heads. They chew peacefully on grass as this figure slips through the night. With a quick and heavy motion that comes from deep within a hungry stomach, this 5-foot, 6-inch, 260-pound stack of muscle and rage shines in the moonlight as it leaps at an unsuspecting yak. The yak tries to use its short horns to fight back in the strong grip of this twisted creature. However, this creature has unnatural strength, and a lot of it. This creature has tusks that it uses to bat away the horns of the yak. This creature has fur-covered muscles and claws to tear apart the yak with ferocious hunger. This creature is nature's ugly duckling, the wereboar. Across this grassy field where the yaks feed is another product of rage and nature. Unlike the wereboar, though, this creature is made of golden fur, twice the muscle of the wereboar, and a locking jaw that is home to long and sharp teeth. As this lion-like creature stands and stares off towards the wereboar, retreating into the woods, he stands over 6 feet tall and towers with a furrowed brow over the yak. With slow and methodical steps, this lion creature, this protector, this leonin, slowly makes his way towards the woods, towards the struggling yak. The wereboar pulls, gripping the yak with its strong biceps around the yak's throat. The yak can struggle, the yak can whine and cry for help. It will do no good. Tonight the wereboar feasts. Tonight the wereboar will have a full belly. The leonin moves aside the brush as he takes powerful, strong, and long strides, crushing and cracking fallen branches with each step. He can hear the yak, smell the wereboar, and feel the fear in the air as the yak is unsure of its future this night. The leonin knows its future. The leonin knows where this yak will be in an hour. This yak will not fall prey to the sick and twisted creatures of the night. The wereboar stops, relaxes his muscles slightly, as it gives them a rest for what is to come. The wereboar can smell it. The wereboar can smell another male, another alpha, and can smell the heat coming off a nearby muscular creature. The wereboar quietly breaks one leg of the yak so that it cannot run, and then gently sets the yak on the ground. He stands up to his full height, flexes all his muscles, and tries to broaden his imposing figure as something steps out of a nearby brush. The moonlight gives off a dim lightness to everything as the leonin steps out of the brush and into a tree-covered clearing. Spots of moonlight show the leonin wearing black leather bracers, a simple chest guard that pads only the front and back, and one black leather shoulder pad over his main weapon arm. The leonin stands to his full height, standing over the wereboar in the moonlight, glares down, and in a deep, menacing voice, claims,
Greetings. I am Falzwin. That yak belongs to the tribe of Evanwile. May I please have it back?
And with that, the wereboar turns and runs. Falzwin smiles down at the yak, knowing that the yak will see its family again tonight. Falzwin scoops up the yak and hums a calming melody as he makes his way back to his herd. There is a scent of freshness and pine in the forest air as water droplets of fresh rain and morning dew cling to blades of grass. The droplets fall to the forest floor as the blades shake with the passing of a large figure, a large and familiar lion humanoid. The leonin stands tall, wearing black leather armor bits over a strong and muscular physique. A full and healthy mane feathers away from his face as he walks steadily through the tall grass. The morning sun warms his face as the sun crests over the horizon with orange light. The Leonin, Falzwin, stops for a moment, closes his eyes, and his strong chest expands heavily as he takes a deep breath through his nose, taking in the fresh and new day as his watch over the herd ends. Falzwin opens his eyes and continues walking. Falzwin smiles as he walks through the thick grass and the trees and into a clearing. This clearing is populated by tents. The tents are posted by vertical logs and branches that give them a hexagonal shape. They are wrapped in animal hide to protect occupants from the weather and give a sense of security to those who are too young or too old to defend themselves against the wild. Falzwin's smile is not for the tents, but for those that are moving about the tents. He makes his way through the campground and to a large fire in the center of the clearing. Grass and forest debris have been moved away to create space for a fire, and small stones sit in a circle around it. Several much larger stones surround the fire to serve as seats. Falzwin is interrupted as a cub wraps around his leg. He looks down and sees the black eyes staring at him out of the face of a tan cub with thick and short fur. His small ears point out to the side as he grips tightly onto his leg. He purrs at Falzwin as he snuggles up against him, and then a shot of energy through the cub as he tugs on Falzwin and energetically begs for a story. The giant Leonin smiles and takes a long and strong step forward towards the fire. He drops onto a large stone, and the cub scampers up him like a tree. An older female Leonin with a full mane of white hair, drawings of sun rays on her cheek, and a simple green cloth draped over herself, walks past Falzwin, smiling down at him and the playful cub. She makes her way to a large pot where she begins to ladle soup into a large clay bowl. Unlike some soups, however, large chunks of meat can be seen clearly in the soup as she pours it into the bowl. Another Leonin, large like Falzwin, pats Falzwin on the shoulder as he passes by and takes a seat on the large stone nearby. This Leonin has a large mane of brown hair with many streaks of gray and a few braids throughout. He has a necklace and arm brace laced with teeth of many shapes and sizes. A few white markings show through his thick, light brown fur as he starts gesturing around the camp. He starts to inform Falzwin of a few things that he may need help with, to be cautious of the river east where a large snake was spotted, and that the young black-furred Maya had succeeded in her first hunt. This older male had a sly smile as he adds that Falzwin is about to have a taste of it. The older female brings over the large clay bowl, and the cubs run over from tents as the cub clinging to Falzwin's legs begins to beg for a story. The cubs settle around Falzwin to hear the story. Some of the cubs are speaking rapidly as they recall past stories, new stories they would like to hear, and guesses as to what adventures Falzwin has completed the night before. Falzwin smiles as he takes the bowl from the older female. He opens his arms and stretches out one leg so that cubs may climb on him. Then he narrows his eyes, looks around at each and every cub, and begins a new story. Late on a summer's day, a fire roared, spirits rose, and cheers could be heard as Zero was voted the Pride Speaker. Each year on the day of the first full moon after each autumn equinox, matriarchs from all of the Leonin prides gather to select a matriarch who acts as a representative of the prides in the wider world. While terms like queen, general, or king are often used to this leader by outsiders, the meaning of the Leonin title Zibanth is closer to speaker. The Leonin speaker is both a warrior and a spiritual leader for her people. Each speaker is considered the manifestation of nature's animus on the world. She walked through the pride's nomadic tents with pride, confidence, and with predator's eyes. She was in a place of power. She was young, a perfect mix of light gold and brown fur, and a fit physique. She earned what she got, but she was also put in a place to have anything she wanted, and she thanked her pride for their celebration of her as she was scanning the pride for someone that she had seen before. And she found him. Near her end to the tent set up for a feast was the Leonin she sought. Cooked deer leg in hand, spear strapped to his back, and braids perfectly falling over his muscular figure was Falzwin. She raised her chin, stared at him intently, and placed her hand on his arm as she passed by. She narrowed her eyes to stare into his. She softly passed her hand over his strong forearm, and Falzwin nodded and raised his meat. Zero's face twisted in confusion. She was the speaker. She was young, she was fit, beautiful, and perfect. The tin flap was raised for her, and she took one look back at Falzwin before stepping into the tent. He was staring at the leg of deer in his hand as he was devouring it. Zero awoke early the next morning. She had been following the steps of Falzwin for a long time. She knew he preferred to watch over the flocks at night. She knew the trail he took to travel back to the Pride. Equipped with this knowledge, Zero smiled. She quickly donned her new speaker's robes and traveled to a lake near the path Falzwin took home. Once there, she took off her robe, stepped into the lake, and prepared in a position that would seem both appealing to his eyes and like she didn't know he was there. Later, much later than she preferred, Falzwin finally came down the path. She quickly dipped into the water and then came up out of the water so that the sun reflected droplets off her body and fur in the morning light. She eyed Falzwin secretly out of the corner of her eye. He was humming to himself and sharpening his spear. He must be able to see her. How could he traverse a path without looking up? How could he simply walk by and not be drawn? "Falzwin!" she blurted out. Falzwin turned to her, looked up, and simply asked,
"Are you in danger?"
Zero frowned. "Well, no." Falzwin waved with the whetstone in his hand.
"Okay."
And he started off down the path again. She just stared after him in disbelief. She knows that some of the males within the pack can seem focused, but this wasn't possible. He couldn't just not notice her. Then she smiled. He did notice her. He did want her. Last night he was hungry and today he was filling. He wasn't sharpening his spear. He was distracting himself as to not stare. He was such a noble Leonin. His mind and body would create a legendary lineage for her. The next day she spotted Falzwin sitting with a hunting partner of his named Drex. They were on the outside of the woods on dead stumps and sharing a small animal of some kind. She sat down with them and they both stopped. Drex held up the meat. Zero ignored him and looked at Falzwin in the eyes. "How do you stay so strong?" she cooed in a soft voice.
"I eat, I run. Also, I have to lift heavy things. Carrying heavy things and eating builds the muscle."
"Yes, but you are truly strong and you are quite a catch."
No, I am strong and fast, so that no one can catch me."
Zero frowned, and then her face changed into a sly smile. "Maybe you could teach me to be fast." Falzwin wiped his hands on the grass at the bottom of the stump.
"No."
Then Falzwin and Drex stood up and started walking off into the woods. Zero glared for a moment, and then her features softened. Was he playing hard to get? Fine. She'll have to let him know that he has won. He may take his prize. That night she slipped into his tent. He was gathering his equipment to go and watch over the flock after a short nap. He nosed her and stood straight. His tall and muscular figure towered over her own capable body. She smiled up at him, and she let her robe drop. She stood there in all her glory and let Falzwin claim his prize. However, he did not.
"I need rest."
"Then I will rest with you."
"No, you will distract me."
"Is that such a bad thing?" Zero looked him in the eyes with a smile.
"Yes, I must rest to be strong for the herd. Now go."
Falzwin picked up her robe and held it up to her. Zero stared in disbelief and then angrily put her robe back on. She turned quickly and stormed out of his tent. Her eyes burned as she walked back to her tent. Falzwin the strong, Falzwin the hunter, Falzwin the caretaker? No, just Falzwin. Just a Leonin like all the others. He thought he was better than her? No, he will learn his place. She is the speaker. She is the one who the Pride wants, not him. He will learn his place.
On a dirt road near the tribe's herd, on a cloudy day, a fierce battle was ending. Falzwin, a strong and experienced fighter, had caught up with some thieves. It was a small group of rat folk. They used the knives and arrows tipped with poisons in order to take down and attack large foes. However, in this instance, the large and muscular Falzwin had caught them unaware from a bush near the road. Earlier that day, the rat folk had attacked another Leonin herd watcher from the shadows and poisoned him. He was now deceased, but he passed while fulfilling his duties. The rat folk tied up most of the herd, strung them to their wagon, and killed the herd that they could not take. A young one happened to cross the scene. That was strike one. The rat folk pillaged, killed, and stole the main food source for the tribe. That was strike two. These rat folk dared to kill Leonin. That was strike three. At this news, Falzwin's eyes burned. He picked up his spear and ran off into the woods. He had no need to be a tracker in order to find this caravan. He had no need to be a hunter to search for the trail. He was a predator, hunting for his next kill. The rat folk were cautious with their movements, but they were not very smart. They whipped the cattle, yelled at the sheep, and laughed as they hit the cattle for fun. Their caravan came into a narrow pass of bushes, and that is when it ended for them. In a flash, a large blur flew across the top of the wagon with archers, knocking them down, off the wagon, or just carrying them with him. After landing on the opposite side of the road and still hidden in the bushes, Falzwin finished off the two rat folk that had been carried with his momentum. Then he quickly ran across the front of the wagon. As he ran back across the road to a large bush on the other side, he used the spearhead to slit the throat of an archer that fell from the wagon, and he also slit the throat of the driver, and he pierced another archer as he kept running. As Falzwin slid the rat folk off his spear and eyed his prey that had now become defensive, another figure was close by. A young Leonin watched Falzwin. His black fur made him almost invisible in the foliage. All that showed was a white stripe on his right arm, but he knew how to stand so that it would stay hidden. He was watching Falzwin's every move. He worked out like Falzwin, he ate like Falzwin, but he couldn't quite be his equal. He admired the movement of muscle and death that Falzwin had become that day. He had seen the caravan of rat folk and followed them, but was unsure of what to do. That is when he saw the giant Leonin spring into a killing spree. Soon he watched Falzwin bob and weave around the cattle. The giant Leonin ducked between cattle, stabbed over sheep with his spear, and soon there were no more rat folk. Falzwin stood amongst the herd and corpses. He breathed heavily and looked around. This young Leonin was watching for a while from the shadows and started wondering why Falzwin was just standing there. But then Falzwin started moving again. He picked up a dagger that a rat folk had tried to use on him. He smelled it, furrowed his brow, and then threw it to the ground. He then watched the seasoned fighter untie the herd from the wagon and start walking back to where their herd previously had been while holding the rope. After Falzwin was out of sight, this young Leonin stepped onto the road. He looked around cautiously before picking up the same dagger that Falzwin had picked up. He smelled it. It was a potent smell, but he did not recognize it. If he had to compare it to something, then he was reminded of eggs that were rotten and the smell of dried blood from a fox. However, the blade had a tint of purple to it. It was very curious, but he knew who he could ask about it. Several hours later, Falzwin raised the flap of his tent and stepped inside. All of the herd was back where it belonged, and the dead animals were burnt or being used for food and resources, and a new watcher has been established for the time being. He stretched and sat on his bed. Falzwin propped his spear against the bedpost. He had cleaned it off, but the stains of blood could still be seen slightly. He stared at the spearhead for a few moments before being interrupted. Zira walked into the tent smiling. Falzwin sat silently as she approached and greeted him. She expressed her thanks for what he did for the tribe before extending a large cup. She had a small cup in her other hand. Falzwin silently took the cup. She started sipping her cup while telling him of how his deeds had been appreciated by the young, the old, the scared, and his fellow warriors. Falzwin still said nothing, but silently took a drink. The drink was a sweet red wine that he did not partake in often. The smell was strong, slightly rancid, and already gave him a headache. He wasn't sure how his tribe could enjoy this. Her words became distant and an ambient noise in the background as he focused on the drink. He took a few more sips. It was familiar, but also not familiar at the same time. There was a slight smell he recognized. He took another sip. If only he could... The room started spinning, and he was horrified to see his own fingers losing the grip on the cup. Then his eyes closed. Looking down on Falzwin, he looked peaceful as his large and muscular chest rose with each breath. His mane of hair looked brushed and braided perfectly. His fur was smooth, clean, and looked soft after a long day. His ornaments and decorations around his simple clothes showed the pride of a true warrior. He looked at peace even as a black furred arm moved slowly across his chest. In the hand of this figure was a dirty dagger that had been found earlier in the day. A white stripe was the only thing visible on this very toned and slightly muscular arm as the dagger slowly moved across the neck of Falzwin. Peace, tranquility, and content remained on Falzwin's face as his own blood started dripping through his bed and under the floor in complete silence.
Yo, did he actually use that in like a proper way?
No. No, you
No?
did not.
Didn't.
No, I said did.
Oh,
It's fine.
wow.
We have it on record, so we can just prove that you're a liar. It's all good.
Mama raised me right.